Thank you for joining us.
So, as the first class of the new year, I thought we would focus a little bit about just taking time in the poses for you to just notice for yourself where maybe you feel like you're really kind of enduring the pose, or that you're maybe having to kind of push yourself to stay in the pose. And then also thinking about, well, maybe where you can soften in the pose. So you could also think of this as yield and push. So sometimes you need to really push into a pose and really engage your muscles. And sometimes you need to really just find that yield and that ease. So I thought that we would use this as a bit of a reflection, and also to look at or feel into the poses and where you'd like more from a pose, whether that means more can mean repetition, or it can mean holding it longer, or where maybe you want to do less of a certain pose because maybe you're feeling you need to build up into it. So those are just a few things to think about as we're moving today. Or I don't even know if thinking is the right word. It's like body thinking, bodyfulness, like really feeling it through the body, and what that's, what kind of story it might be telling you, where you want to be in the pose and with your yoga practice this year in 2022. So maybe you don't really know, maybe you want to try something different. I mean, we all need novel experiences. Some experienced yoga teachers like to talk about going through the same practice because that shows you your mind, what's happening in your mind during that day. And that has a real use for it, that repetition over and over again. But at the same time, we also need novel experiences. So maybe this is your year of discovering a new yoga, or maybe a new form of yoga or way of practicing. So just a few words to start your practice. So let's begin. So just come down, and I pulled out a few props, not sure if I'm going to use them, but just come down and lay on your back with the feet, knees bent, and the feet on the floor. This is usually for most people, and it's usually an okay position to start in, because your pelvis is on the floor, your shoulders, back of the head, your feet, and just notice what you notice about your body. Do you feel more in one side or the other? Is there more comfort or discomfort in different parts? And maybe just start to press the feet a little bit and bring a little bit of movement. Now you can either press both feet at the same time and a little bit of rock action, or you can press one foot and then the other, and that just wakens up or just reminds you of the different sides of the body. So maybe do a few, press those feet at the same time with a little bit of a rock. You might even get a little bit of spine release. And then do a few just stepping one, pressing one foot, so it kind of shifts the knees a little bit, shifts the pelvis. It gives you a little side to side sort of rolling action. Because, in yoga, we try to engage the whole body and become aware of the whole body. Think shoulder stand, I think it actually means all over body pose, actually. I think that's what one of the interpretations is. So now just come back to neutral, or I don't know if this is really neutral, and just place the palms down next to your hips, and then start to bend the knees in and bring them straight. Now what you might find is maybe you want to soften for the first few and just start to slowly engage the legs until you can press through the heels. Or maybe you are feeling ready that you can really press through those heels so that you're stretching the backs of the legs a bit. You also want to notice when you put your hands here, what happens in the shoulders? Are you feeling like you want to engage those shoulders? Or can you actually soften them? For me, I often feel like I want to engage my shoulders. So you may have a completely different experience. So right now we're just starting to warm up those legs and those abdominals. Now if you want more with your arms, you can interlock the hands under the head. I really like this position because it opens out my fronts of my shoulders, and I just appreciate this. Now, but if you really want to engage your arms more, you may want to bring them overhead. So you might really want more abdominal action here. And then on the next one, you're going to want to bring in one knee and straighten out the leg, and then bring the knees in, stretch through one of the legs. And again, you may want to begin with a little bit of softness in stretching through the legs. Or perhaps you're already ready to really press through that heel. Feel what that does in the abdominals and what that does. With my arms overhead, I can really feel it in the side body, but you may want to keep the arms here and just do it more gently. You can also do it with legs raised a little higher if your body's not ready to go with it. But if you want to go into more pushing rather than yielding, you can really have that one leg lower to the floor, maybe hold it longer. The other leg. And then bring the feet back down, and then just do a little bit of windshield wiper with the knees, which really is kind of softening in the lower back. So trying to find a little bit of yield there. And you may find that you like this movement, or this movement may not be what you like so much, and so you might do less of it, or you might do more of it because you want more of that lower back stretch. So those are a few options of playing with that push and yield into this pose. So I might really push that top knee more, that top thigh, to get more stretch in the lower back. So that's just an idea of how that might apply here. And then just roll over to your side and come into all fours. So it's very common, this position, this all four position, where the knees, shins, top of the feet are on the floor. And then we've got the hands and the fingers spread. So if I'm pushing, like in the cat's pose, I can really push it, or I can try to soften this sort of cat and dog tilt. So you can have looseness in the elbows when you start it, and just It's almost like this part of the pose is the yielding and this part might be the pushing into the cat tilt. So you can play around with this and see where you might want to yield more or push more. Because you might just want to push more into the dog tilt because you want more in the arms, more power in the arms, or more dropping the chest forward. So just have a play with where you want to push or yield more in this pose. Because you could totally do it with soft elbows and yielding into it. Now, my body wants to, as it yields, it wants to do more of that circling in the pose and circling the hips. So that would be an option if you're really wanting to yield into this pose and find the softness. But if you want to start to, find more strength and power, that's when you really want to straighten those arms. Really press through those hands on the mat and pressing into the tops of the feet. Of course, if you have ankles that might be tight, you might not be able to feel that press in the tops of the feet. You might need to roll something under the ankles to give you more leverage there. So just a few ideas. And then we'll start to lift the leg in more and swing it out. I need to come forward. And this is kind of a yielding pose too, where we're just softening into it. Just get some more mobility through the spine and through the legs. Now, of course, if you want to power it more, you would really press those hands, and maybe you would really point the toe and feel that extent through the leg and hold it for a few breaths, and then you could hold it in. So that would be more of the power of the pose, and this would be more of the yielding of the pose. It's just getting that swing. So you can play with that and see which your body needs, and maybe it needs a bit of both. So, and then for a little powering up, keep the leg extended and inhale the other arm up. So it's my right leg back and my left arm forward. And that really, that extension would be powering up a little bit, without pushing through a little bit. And then bring that leg down, and we'll do the other side. So you can start with more muscle action, or you can start with the yielding and just getting that swing going. To muscle it, you can really extend and press those hands when you extend that leg back. You can bring the knee in and hold it in, get more abdominal work here. So those are a few options. And for the last little one, we will keep that leg extended, extend the other arm, find the balance, pushing through the fingertips and the toe tips, and bringing it down. And then we'll go into downward dog. And so again, if you just want to yield into the pose, you could just slowly tuck the toes, coming up, finding a little bit of movement in the legs. So this would be more of the yielding into downward dog. But if you really want to power downward dog and really push, you would press into those hands, engage the arms, bend the knees, and then bring the chest down and straight through the legs. So that's how you would power more through downward dog. So you can be in the yielding version or the power version, but just notice, what does your body prefer? And at different times of the day, it might prefer one or the other. Or maybe you need to do a few downward dogs to see, you may need to do a few more that are yielding and then come into more of a power one. And then bring the knees down and go into big toes together, knees wide. Now this is more of a yielding pose for sure, but you can also keep a lot of action in the arms, which gives it, and you can be more lifted from the hips, which gives this a more pushing through the pose. So it's like that readiness. Or you can just totally yield and come down, and then eventually it becomes child's pose with the forehead down and the arms by the side. So that's when it becomes a yielding pose, really yielding into gravity, to the floor. Then again, bring the arms out and slowly come up again into downward dog and go into the version that your body is calling your attention to, either the pushing or the yielding. And just notice what you notice in your own body, if you need to do downward dog more, or you need to do shorter versions or longer versions. So just doing whatever version you need to do. And then bring the knees down into all fours. And then swing the right foot between your hands. So we'll come into a lunge. And again, if you want to be more pushing in this pose, you can come upright, really engage those abdominals, really press the top of the back foot and the bottom of the front foot, and then come forward. If you want to be less, more yielding, you can just come up in this pose, find the softness, and then slowly come forward. So it's really about you sensing into what your push and yield is in your body. But also we know that sometimes we need to engage those abdominals so that we protect the lower back and the sacrum. So how much engagement do you need there? And then bring the hands down and swing that knee back. And then swing the other leg front. And again, coming into kind of this upright, sort of squared off position. And then deciding how much yielding and how much pushing you need in this pose. So you can really press that back foot and the front foot and then come forward. Or you can find the yielding into gravity and then allow yourself to come forward. Then inhale, come up, bring that foot down, hands down, and we'll start to build some standing poses from the ground up, and we'll see about push and yield there. So swing that right foot between, and then tuck the back toes under and pivot that heel, and then you can slowly come up into triangle pose. Now, you may just want to find that yield and that softness, and you could just sort of stay here in that softness. Or if you really want to find the push, you really press into the feet, into the abdominals, and then you can full on through the arms. So that is the push. Or you can just have the arms next to you and just push through the legs. Or you can just have a more soft version and have a little bit of bend in the knees. And even just kind of rest the arms on the legs. And then bend in the front leg. Bring that back knee down. Bring that back. So in a way, that coming back down is kind of a yielding. So now we'll swing the other foot through. Tuck the toes under, bring the heel down. And right now, I've got softness in my legs. And you can either yield into the pose, or you can push through those feet, really engage the abdominals and bring the arms through. Find power in the pose. Or you can keep the hands, arms soft, and find the yield in the pose. Then bending the front leg, bring that knee down and the foot back. And again, between poses, you can do a bit of this yielding, or you might want to do more pushing and come into a downward facing dog. And again, that's something you can experiment with and find out, more about what you need in your practice. So now we'll bring the right foot through again. And now tuck the toes under. We'll come into warrior one pose. Again, you can yield into the pose. And just keep it soft. Or you can really engage the legs and really bring those arms up into that full warrior lunge, Virabhadrasana 1 pose. Feel the power. Or you could just keep the arms next to you and soften that back leg and just try to find that yield where you've got the hips right between the feet. So that's another way to engage with this pose. And then bringing the hands down, dropping the back knee, bringing the other leg through. And then inhale the left leg through. Placing the toes underneath and either coming into the full strength of it and the arms coming up into warrior one, or having more softness and feeling that yield in the pose. Sometimes you need to do that yield before you can find that power and that push. Bringing the hands down, the back knee down, and then either finding a little bit of yielding between the pose, or you can come into a push and really feel your power, your strength. Then bringing the knees down again. Swing the right leg between. Tuck the back toes up. We'll come into Parsvakonasana. So you can soften with the legs and really bring that forearm there and come into kind of a yield in the pose. Just stay here for a few breaths or as long as you need to. And then if you want to come more into the power of the pose, you can actually put the hand down if you've got that flexibility. Really power through the legs. And bring both hands down, dropping the back knee, bringing that through. Then the left leg through and tucking through the back toes. You bring the heel down and you keep some softness and yielding in the legs with the forearm here. Just trying to find that softness in the pose. Or you can go into full on power in the pose, push in the pose. And then dropping that back knee. And then either coming into some yielding in transition, or a push into downward dog, or you can do a yielding into downward dog. And then just bring the knees down. And we'll sit in Dandasana. If you need a little bit of height, you can sit on a block or a blanket. And we'll just sit for a few breaths to feel, just notice what happened in that practice for you of playing with yield and push. And in this pose too, let's just start in a bit of a yield. So a little bend in my arms, a little bend in my legs. This sort of helps me locate my sit bones for this pose. So you can have a little bit of movement here. And then if you want to go into a little bit more push, you can really press through the hands and press through the legs. Now, in this pose, you know, some of us are more square in our body type or more rectangular, so it'll depend on you and your hands and your length, whether you can get that push or you need those hands further behind you to get more of that push through the arms. So it's just going to depend on how you are. Just feel that push, but then you can also return to that yield. What does that feel like? And also go into a little bit of windshield wiper with the legs here as well. Notice I slipped off my blanket when I did that. Stay on my blanket and do that little bit of a yield. And then come back and see if you can go into that push again. See what that does for your body. And then soften the arms and the knees. And we'll go into a little bit of head to knee pose in a soft way. So I'm bringing my right foot back. And you know, if you need support under the knee, you can put something under that leg. So if we have softness here, you start with the forward leg bent. And then what happens when we try to push through the legs here, so that foot comes forward,
but having softness on top. So let's really press through the legs, see what that's like. But with softness on the top, yielding on the top. And then can you slowly walk the hands forward and feel a bit of the yield while you support and push through the legs. And inhale, slowly come up. Bring both legs together. Again, we can go back into that yielding. You can windshield wiper a little bit. Then you can do another press through the legs. Do that push. Then soften again and yield and bring the other foot back. Use any support you might need. So then we've got the yield in the legs. And now can we find the push through the legs? And then begin and keep the top of the body in a bit of a yield and walk the hands forward. And perhaps push again through the legs. Then yield through the upper body. Then inhale, slowly come up and bring both legs forward. And again, you can really push through the body or you can really yield through the body. So just notice which one you really want to do. For me right now, I really want to push. I really want to feel that extension through my spine, through my legs, through my arms, that engagement. You may want to do something completely different. You can either go into a feet up the wall, feet on a chair, or just full-blown Shavasana. And ultimately, going into some kind of Shavasana or feet up the wall is a yielding pose. So now is when we really want to get into yielding. But this is also where you might feel that your body is holding on to some tension or holding on to some push. So just start to become aware of your body as I suggest you go into a yielding and a spreading. So what's happening in the legs? They really yield to gravity, to being supported on the mat or up the wall or in the chair. And perhaps you notice in a percentage, like, are they letting go 40% or 50 or 60? Or 80, just notice, even when I say those numbers, if something happens. Both legs really yield into gravity. And then what about the pelvic structure, the pelvic bone? And the pelvis really yield into gravity. Where might it still be holding on? Where might it be able to yield just that little bit more?
And then just noticing your rib cage. Where can you yield in your rib cage? Where is it still holding on or pushing? Where can it yield just that little more into gravity? And what about the shoulder girdle, that structure on the spine? Where can that yield? Where is it holding on? Can it soften and yield even more into gravity? What about the arms? Where in the arms are still pushing? Where in the arms can they become more soft and yield into gravity? What about the throat, the neck, the head, the face? Where is pushing still happening? Where can you just yield a little bit more into gravity? Just feel into your body overall. Where may you still be pushing? Where may you yield just a little bit? A little bit more into gravity. And then slowly begin to reawaken your body. In order to do this gently, you want to bring some movement into your fingers, into your toes. This is where you may need a little push to stretch through the body, to roll to your side, come up to sitting, whatever you need. So we need both pushing and yielding. So both have value. And perhaps for 2020 you find what works for you in poses to yield or to push, or a little bit of both. Thank you and namaste. Namaste. Thank you for watching and joining us.